Shadow Hack. Chapter 711, Return to Lucky Wind City. Yuan Biao looked all around with endless astonishment and quickly asked, "What is this? Can it teleport us to other regions?" "Yes. It can teleport us to my home world." Yuan Biao couldn't help but curiously ask, "Then, what do you need my help with?" "You came to the ancient lands for me, but how can I assist your people?" Yuan Biao was somewhat naive. She had been thinking that Li Yunmu only sought her help to make her use of the power in her body to resurrect his clansmen. But when she followed Li Yunmu to his earth, she discovered that everything was safe and sound while the so-called crisis didn't exist. However, she didn't want to believe that Li Yunmu had lied to her and suspiciously asked him, "This is the region where you have lived until now? But I see that this place is completely fine. Why did you say that I can rescue your people? If I hadn't said that, how could H.A.C.K and Nuwa be willing to let the supreme treasure of the ancient lands come with me?" Yuan Biao was slightly startled, and she said in anger, You lied to Emperor H.A.C.K and Empress Nuwa? What exactly do you intend to do?" Li Yunmu looked at her indifferently. "The 66 parallel planes are about to merge and my plane won't be able to escape this fate either. To rescue it, I will have to change the trajectory of stars, and the ancient secret method is an essential treasure for that." Yuan Biao's expression suddenly turned unsightly. She was unable to see through the man in front of her. In the origin world, he was optimistic and genial, so why did he suddenly change into a cold and detached man upon leaving it? "You lied to me." Yuan Biao finally managed to react, and her body began to quiver. "I didn't lie to you, you are indeed the only hope for my planet. It's only that the being inside my body said that if I want to change the trajectory of stars, you will need to endure some suffering." The sliding fan in Yuan Biao's hand fell, and she shuddered from head to toe. Were your feelings towards me also fake?" It was a big blow to Yuan Biao that woke her up from her first love. Li Yunmu shook his head and said, "You don't need to be so nervous. The planes will merge in a few days, so I can still explain this to you. First let me take you to see my people and also, my parents." Yuan Biao's mood had already sunk into the abyss. The Li Yunmu in front of her at that moment felt completely unfamiliar. She shook her head. "I will not come with you if you don't explain everything clearly. Then I will tell you. In order to obtain you, I did lie to H.A.C.K and Nuwa, but it wasn't for myself, it was only to save everything precious to me. This planet houses all I hold dear, here are my parents as well as all my oldest friends." Yuan Biao smiled bitterly. "This is why you used me." "I said I didn't use you. It is something which I learned only later. Don't tell me that you really think that I am such a heartless person. I have to choose between you and my family. If you want, do tell me how I should choose." Yuan Biao took a deep breath and said, "All right, I am willing to help you. These few days will be our last time together." Yuan Biao's words stabbed Li Yunmu like a blade. He felt his heart bleeding continuously. After that conversation, they two of them went to the Lucky Wind City. What they saw upon coming close was completely different from what Li Yunmu remembered. There was a beautiful woman overseeing the city. It was Lin Yuero who had already turned into illusion god. Li Yunmu's return was like a dose of ecstasy for the Lucky Wind City. "Master has returned. City Lord, the Master has returned." Li Tian, Li Dai, Li Feng, and Li Yunmu couldn't control their excitement. The moment they saw Li Yunmu return, their hearts began to jump in happiness. When Lin Yuero heard about Li Yunmu's return, she immediately stood up from the city lord's seat and rushed toward the city gate. At that moment, the travel-worn Li Yunmu returned to Lucky Wind City. He was welcomed by many Fluxers and supreme transcending level Flux experts. Yuan Biao could feel everyone's warm feelings and sense Li Yunmu's position in the city. It seemed like he had said the truth and was perhaps their only hope. When Li Yunmu arrived at the city lord's manor, he discovered a woman having already come to welcome them. Lin Yuero's eyes were filled with delight. The instant she saw Li Yunmu, she instantly rushed toward him and entered his embrace. Because of it, Yuan Baiao's eyes filled with jealousy. She couldn't help but curse inwardly. Who is this woman? How can she hold my man the moment he came? Lin Yuero, I have troubled you during this time. You have worked hard for Lucky Win City. I already heard from everyone. Lin Yuero's eyes turned foggy, and she bitterly said, You have finally returned. I wonder, how was your trip to the origin world? Li Yunmu looked down at her and said with a smile, Haven't I returned already? Lin Yuero laughed, then her gaze fell on the restless woman by Li Yunmu's side. This is... Li Yunmu quickly introduced them. I forgot to introduce you, this is my wife Yuan Baiao. His words fell on Lin Yuero's ears like a thunderbolt. He hadn't gone to the origin world for a long time, but he had already gotten himself a wife. Yuan Baiao heard Li Yunmu introduce her formally, and she suddenly coiled around his arm. Who is she? Li Yunmu, you still haven't introduced her. Li Yunmu laughed awkwardly, then introduced Lin Yuero. She is my friend and also the new city lord. When I wasn't here, she administered the Lucky Win City in my place. Yuan Baiao nodded in understanding. So she is your subordinate. When Lin Yuero heard those words, a strange light flickered past her eyes, following which she respectfully said, Hi, younger sister. Yuan Baiao frowned at her. You? Who is your younger sister? Since you are Li Yunmu's subordinate, you should talk to me more respectfully. Baiao, don't make things hard for Lin Yuero. Her prestige in Lucky Win City is very high. While I wasn't here, she took care of Lucky Win City properly. Chapter 712, Meeting the Parents. Lin Yuero nodded and smiled. I treat Li Yunmu like a younger brother. Since he lets me manage Lucky Win City, I naturally do my best. That's why I called you younger sister, so don't misunderstand me. Yuan Baiao snorted and then said to Li Yunmu, Take me to your parents. Li Yunmu got up and said to Lin Yuero, I will leave the matter of the city to you. This time, I have returned to let Baiao meet my parents and to rescue our earth. Lin Yuero bowed and replied, I know. Upon seeing Yuan Baiao pull Li Yunmu away by hand and gradually disappear together with him, Lin Yuero's heart began to bleed. The man whom she had liked for so long had become someone else's husband. The pain of it threatened to suffocate her. If she knew that Li Yunmu had taken 3 wives in total in the origin world, who knew what she would think? This Li Yunmu, wasting Mai and Ling Shuang's feelings for him, but he... Lin Yuero frowned, feeling endless sadness in her heart. The 4 brothers Li Tian, Li Dai, Li Fend, and Li Yun had a general idea of what was going on. They could see that the city lord had deep feelings for their master, otherwise, her complexion wouldn't have become so unsightly after seeing Baiao lead their master away. City lord, you mustn't give up at all costs. A man having 3 wives and 4 concubines is quite ordinary. If city lord doesn't mind being master's concubine. Li Feng was someone who was more understanding of other people's feelings, so after seeing that Lin Yuero liked Li Yunmu, he couldn't help but make a suggestion. Lin Yuero's eyes went wide upon hearing his words. You shut up. I don't require you to butt into my matters. After Lin Yuero reached the city lord's manor, she resolutely shut the door behind her. Our city lord is probably angry at master. He actually brought back a wife without saying a single word. As a person who liked him, she isn't able to accept it, Li Yun said. Li Feng sighed. Seems like Lucky Win City will turn into a battlefield for the 2 women. Then I think City Lord will win. There is no opponent that her strategies can't defeat. After Lin Yuero returned to her room, she began to think about the problem of whether she truly liked Li Yunmu or not. Why exactly did he deserve to be liked by her? Now that he had a wife, did it bother her? She kept pondering the problem for a long time. If she chose to renounce her love because he had a wife, then that couldn't be considered as true love. When she thought about it, Lin Yuero's spirit suddenly rose. She also wanted to become Li Yunmu's wife, and she decided to boldly tell her feelings to him. Although this attitude was going against the behavior of Eastern women, Lin Yuero felt that she couldn't do anything else. All traditions were just floating clouds in front of her happiness. Li Yunmu led Yuan Biao to his house, where his father and mother spent their days comfortably. Seeing Li Yunmu return, the eyes of the two elders turned misty. It had been a long time since they had seen their son. They couldn't help but caress his cheeks with their coarse hands. "Dad, Mom! I have returned. That's good. That's good." Li Yunmu wiped their tears and then pulled Yuan Biao's hand before introducing her to them. "Dad, Mom! This is my wife, Biao." "Wife?" The eyes of the two elderly went wide when they turned to look at Yuan Biao. She was a very mature and beautiful woman, and the more the two elderly looked at her, the more they liked her as Li Yunmu's wife. Yuan Biao was also a thoughtful person, so she promptly took their hands and cordially said, "Father, Mother." After hearing her words, the two elders couldn't help but praise her. "Yunmu, you truly are skilled, getting such a thoughtful wife. But why didn't you even consult us once before such an important matter like marriage?" Li Yunmu didn't know how to explain it, so he could only lie to them. "It was urgent and I couldn't return at the time." The two old people sighed and said, "This time, how long will you stay? At least eat the food cooked by your mother before leaving, okay?" Li Yunmu nodded and sat down. The entire household happily ate food together. Yuan Biao could be considered a happy girl who was relatively good at coaxing the elderly, so the couple loved her more and more, until they were reluctant to part with her. But Yuan Biao was completely clear in her heart that she didn't have much time remaining. The time she had left with Li Yunmu was decreasing with each passing moment. If she could make the two elderly people happy, it could be considered as her fulfilling one of the responsibilities as Li Yunmu's wife. In a few days, he would use her to rescue his people, and they would be eternally separated like yin and yang. At night, the elderly finally fell asleep while chatting with Yuan Biao. In the meantime, Li Yunmu encountered Lin Yuero at the gate to their house. "Lin Yuero, why are you here? We have already finished having dinner, you are late." Without waiting for Li Yunmu to finish, Lin Yuero jumped into his embrace and said in a soft voice, "Li Yunmu, I like you. Even if you have a wife now, I don't care. I am willing to do anything for you." Li Yunmu was somewhat dumbstruck after hearing Lin Yuero's sudden confession. He felt his heart jumping loudly. Actually, he had always felt that it was impossible for him to marry Ling Shuang or Lin Yuero because they were too intense. In the end, they ended up as his best friends. If Lin Yuero had been his sweetheart, he would have never let her manage Lucky Win City since it was extremely dangerous. Yet Lin Yuero suddenly confessed her feelings to him, and it left him dumbstruck. "Lin Yuero, are you all right?" Li Yunmu thought that Lin Yuero had too much to drink, but then why didn't it seem like she has had too much to drink? "Do you think that I am inferior to that wife of yours?" she asked calmly. "No, I..." Before Li Yunmu could finish his words, Lin Yuero pressed her cherry-red lips against his. Li Yunmu's eyes went wide. Could that be considered as a forced kiss? Moreover, it came from the person whom he considered to be his best friend. The scene was seen by Yuan Biao, who had come out to look for him, and the bowl she held fell from her hands. When Li Yunmu heard the shattering sound, he swiftly pushed Lin Yuero away and yelled, "Biao!" Chapter 713, Sacrifice. When Yuan Biao suddenly turned around and left, Lin Yuero felt that she had made a mistake, and guilt filled her chest. She had voiced the words at the bottom of her heart, so she felt relieved, but she was deeply pained for causing trouble for Li Yunmu. Yuan Biao's spirit was going to disappear as soon as Li Yunmu saved his clansmen, but when she saw him and Lin Yuero together, it was a heavy psychological blow for her. Regardless of how much Lee Yunmu chased her, Yuan Biao kept running farther away. After several kilometers, Lee Yunmu finally overtook her and caught her in an embrace. However, Yuan Biao kept struggling to get free from his hands while saying calmly, "Let go of me. I am not angry." Lee Yunmu suspiciously looked at Yuan Biao. "If you aren't angry, then why are you running away? You shouldn't lie to me. Your eyes will betray the truth. Actually, I think you and that girl are really suitable, you are both from the same world. After your people are saved, she is the most suitable choice for you. She can guard your most precious things in your place and take care of your mother and father. It is like shooting two birds with one stone. And I fear that I am going to disappear from this world." Yuan Biao had already thought of the worst outcome. If everything truly went like Li Yunmu had said, she would most probably vanish from the human world. After that, she would be unable to remain together with Li Yunmu, so she could only think about how he would proceed afterwards. Since she had already thought of it, then if Li Yunmu could get together with someone else, then perhaps she would feel somewhat better. "You misunderstand, there's nothing going on between me and Lin Yuero. That was just a misunderstanding," Li Yunmu swiftly explained. Yuan Biao gestured at him with her hands. "You don't need to explain. Tomorrow, unleash my power. I don't want to continue waiting. Each day I wait, I have to suffer the torment of another day. If I don't separate from you, it only delays the fate of your clansmen." Yuan Biao's words shook Li Yunmu, and he became emotional. Could it be that Yuan Biao was truly prepared to meet death? If the system hadn't informed him that there was a method to save her, he didn't know what choice he would make. "Have you really thought it through?" he asked calmly. Yuan Biao instantly replied without thinking. "I have already thought about it. Li Yunmu, this is the best choice for you, so I won't continue staying by your side. You must take care of yourself properly." Li Yunmu turned silent while looking at Yuan Biao's departing figure. His heart almost couldn't bear it. How could such a beautiful woman be ready to die? The next day, Yuan Biao got up early while Lin Yuero had come to Li Yunmu's house to personally apologize to him. "Younger sister, your elder sister." Yuan Biao spoke without waiting to hear her explanation. "If you really like Li Yunmu, I hope that you will take care of him properly in the future." Lin Yuero was slightly startled. Was the woman before her crazy? Wasn't she Li Yunmu's wife? How could she say those words? Why was she willing to surrender so easily? Could it be? Lin Yuero didn't dare to believe it, but seeing Yuan Biao's earnest appearance, it didn't seem like she was lying. At that moment, she had no idea what was going on around her. "Younger sister, I and Li Yunmu really aren't what you think. Regardless of what you do, I only hope that after I leave, you will properly take care of his parents and him in my place." Yuan Biao's words seemed like the final parting before death, so Lin Yuero pulled Yuan Biao closer and said, "Younger sister, you cannot do anything foolish. This time I came to apologize to you, you cannot." At this time Li Yunmu showed up and pulled Lin Yuero away. "Although I and Yuan Biao have married, she is also the ancient secret method." Ancient secret method? Countless question marks appeared in Lin Yuero's mind. The illusion god inside her body spoke up at that moment. Ancient secret method is something from origin world. It can change the trajectory of stars. I would have never imagined that it would surprisingly take human form. Yuan Biao didn't say anything. Golden light filled her body, and she turned into a book full of intelligence which fell into Li Yunmu's hands. "You went to the origin world for her?" Lin Yuero asked curiously. Li Yunmu took a deep breath. I searched for all sorts of methods to rescue our world, and finally I learned that this ancient secret method could change the trajectory of stars and was the only hope for our continued existence." Lin Yuero was slightly startled by Li Yunmu's words. It seemed that everything was for their earth. Then what about her? It will absorb her entire strength, and her spirit will dissipate. From then on, she will no longer be able to take human form, Li Yunmu said in a voice full of emotion. When she heard about Yuan Biao sacrificing herself to save their world, Lin Yuero suddenly sensed that she had been a little bit selfish. She was surprisingly trying to fight over a man with a woman who was sacrificing herself for them. She covered her face, unable to say anything, while Li Yunmu prepared to use the ancient secret method in his hands and suck all of its power. But he was quite reluctant and kept hesitating for a long time. In the end, Yuan Biao spoke up to urge him on. Don't hesitate. Your people are the most important in your heart. Li Yunmu didn't hesitate anymore and immediately began to use the ancient secret method. The golden light gradually entered his body as if he and Yuan Biao joined each other and turned into one person. After Li Yunmu finished absorbing the ancient secret method, he saw countless golden particles glimmering in the sky. They were the dissipating spirit of Yuan Biao. At this time, the system gave him a reminder. Use the great devouring technique and quickly store the dissipating spirit inside your body. Li Yunmu promptly followed the system's words. After it was done, the system spoke again. Now combine the power of the ancient secret method with the great devouring technique and pour it into the whole world. After that, you'll be able to use your world to devour other planes. Li Yunmu did as instructed and began to combine the power of the ancient secret method with the great devouring technique. Soon, the combined powers began to bubble out from his body. Chapter 714, The Devouring of Other Planes. When Lin Yuero saw the strange scene, her eyes went completely wide. What the hell was Li Yunmu doing? Just a moment ago, she had clearly seen him completely absorb the power of the ancient secret method, which was his wife. How could he do that to her? Lin Yuero couldn't continue watching. She couldn't believe that it was the same Li Yunmu, who was a warm person, before her. She rushed to him and furiously said, "Stop your hand. If you continue, she will really disappear." Li Yunmu bit his lip, then pushed Lin Yuero away. "Don't tell me you want the earth to disappear," he bellowed. Lin Yuero frowned. "I hadn't expected that you are a completely cold and ruthless person. Don't tell me that there's no other method? Is it necessary for someone to sacrifice themselves?" Li Yunmu looked coldly at her. "If there was some other way, then I wouldn't have done this to her. I thought you understood me the most in this world." After Li Yunmu finished speaking, he paid Lin Yuero, who was stunned, no more attention. He went to an empty space while thinking of his world devouring the other planes. He then poured the combined powers in his body into the earth. With the power of ancient secret method, he could casually transform the trajectory of the stars. After he did that, the earth could continue moving according to the trajectory he determined and avoid the collision with the other planes. The method for changing the trajectory of stars was already known to the gods of the origin world, but they only silently watched without participating in the matter. After all, it was the matter of the 66 planes. They weren't concerned about which Earth would be the fortunate one and survive. Li Yunmu transmitted the power inside his body into the Earth without the slightest hesitation, and the whole Earth seemed to be covered by golden light. Gradually, the Earth began to push away from its original trajectory, moving at a speed surpassing other parallel planes. Li Yunmu's face was completely calm. He had paid a huge price for his world, but had finally succeeded, and relief filled his heart. "If this Earth is the only remaining plane, what do you intend to do in the future?" the system indifferently asked. "I want to become the master of this Earth and the ruler of all of the origin world. In any case, I don't want my loved ones to ever again come under any harm," Li Yunmu answered. The pity was that Yuan Biao couldn't hear those words, so only the system could admire them. Yuan Biao's spirit had already dissipated. If Li Yunmu truly used half his cultivation to forcefully resurrect her, his ambitions would probably never come true. After a moment, Li Yunmu continued to speak. "I know what you are worried about. You are afraid that after I rescue Yuan Biao, it will be impossible for me to reach the present peak state. If we return to the origin world, we will be unable to contend against the gods there. This isn't your responsibility. You also needn't stake your life for this, the system said calmly. If they won't harm my loved ones, then I naturally won't antagonize them. But if they have designs on my earth, then regardless of their strength, I won't let them off. When the system heard the words that came out of Li Yunmu's mouth when he spoke about his world, it had a feeling that it would be unable to get in the way of the strong emotions ruling the young man's heart. Who allowed you to make decisions like that? Even if you lose half your cultivation, I won't abandon you. Many thanks. It was the first time that the system had said something that was relatively warm. At the same time, the earth, which was protected by the combined power of great devouring technique and ancient secret method, got close to another parallel plane. Perhaps that plane also had many formidable experts, but they were about to disappear because in their universe, only one earth could exist. The other 65 would fade away from existence and disappear. Boom! With a loud sound, the two planes collided, and Li Yunmu's earth enveloped in a cover of golden light instantly devoured the other plane. After seeing his earth digest another plane, Li Yunmu heaved a sigh of relief. However, he didn't know that the other plane had two experts who had dodged the calamity because of their formidable strength and landed on the earth which had devoured their plane. They hid themselves, intending to wait for an opportunity to avenge themselves. The other 64 parallel planes were also devoured by Li Yunmu's earth, and some high-level experts from those planes had also hidden on Li Yunmu's earth. After the 66 parallel planes were joined, Li Yunmu's plane was finally the only one remaining. In the origin world, there was an organization which was observing the change in the trajectory of stars. They noticed what happened as soon as the first parallel plane disappeared and soon saw how only one parallel plane was left. After the underworld serpent disappeared, that organization had risen to prominence. The majority of their people were close to God realm, and they became the intelligence network of the western region. They were called Kangyu sect, and the majority of their people knew about the merging of the parallel planes. They had come to the origin world before it happened to form the organization. They were keenly observing the situation of the 66 parallel planes every day, and on that day, they finally saw the unavoidable calamity reaching its end. That Earth is the only one left. All the other Earths have been devoured by it. It should have been done by that person called Li Yunmu. In the origin world, we can hear his name everywhere. Reportedly, he was the one who exterminated Underworld Serpent. Haha, the Underworld Serpent was the most formidable intelligence network in the western region at that time, but now their work had been taken over by us. Li Yunmu is lucky to not be in the origin world, or he would have been killed without mercy. Relax. A person like him will certainly return to the origin world. He did that for his world and for his wives. Kangyu sect's members smiled at each other. They had a tacit understanding of each other's thoughts. Chapter 715, Millennium Divine Staff. Li Yunmu didn't know that the power which had recently risen to prominence in the origin world was surprisingly scheming against him. In the meantime, the Earth had also lost its peace and safety because of the higher-level experts who had come from other planes and waited for an opportunity to strike. Their hatred for Li Yunmu had already reached the peak. But Li Yunmu was oblivious to everything. He released Yuan Baiao's spirit from his body and began to gradually congeal it again. The system suddenly stopped him. Slow down. Li Yunmu frowned. What? You idiot, I said you can use half your cultivation to resurrect her. If you keep pouring energy like this, then although her spirit will be resurrected, she will turn into a human puppet. Li Yunmu promptly collected back the spirit of Yuan Baiao and asked, then what else do I need to do? Can you tell me in one time? Every region has an important treasure, which I left behind and which they now guard. The ancient secret method is what I left behind in the eastern domain's ancient lands. If you want to resurrect the woman's spirit and even change her into human again, you must make a trip to poles of morning and evening. I left the Millennium Divine Staff there. It can transmit the power of your cultivation and transform it into human form. It is an extremely rare treasure. Li Yunmu was slightly startled. When he thought about it, he still hadn't gone to the 2 poles of morning and evening. But he remembered the system's words that it was divided into 2 sects. If they rashly entered, wouldn't it be dangerous? The system sounded calm, however. You don't have much time remaining. Yuan Baiao's spirit can only stay inside your body for a week. If you can't find the Millennium Divine Staff by then, she will become akin to a zombie. Even if she is resurrected, she will remain eternally asleep. The system's words stabbed Li Yunmu's heart like a sharp blade. When he had heard about such an option, why had he rushed to make his decision? But the system had already said it was like that, so what could he do? Still, he let his curiosity get the better of him for a moment. You say that there exists a treasure in every region. I stayed in the land of ice for a long time, so how come I didn't see any treasure that you speak about now? System smiled before replying. You think you haven't seen it? Li Yunmu shook his head, implying that he didn't understand and said, you should stop keeping people on tenterhooks. Speak quickly. Brunhilde's divine spear. You think it belongs to her? It's the treasure I left behind in the land of ice. Li Yunmu was startled. It was no wonder then that the system could accurately tell the method to use Brunhilde's divine spear. It was all because it had belonged to the system before. He also learned that the treasure left in the vast ocean was the secret genetic code, but he didn't get to know what treasure was left behind in Lanlu of the southern region. Regardless of how much he asked, the system refused to tell him. After the earth devoured the other planes, Li Yunmu finally felt like the heavy weight on his shoulders had been removed. However, he had to quickly return to the origin world to save Yuan Baiao. He felt that he was unworthy of her, but that didn't change anything. It was what he owed her. Even if the road ahead was filled with thorns and bristles, Li Yunmu didn't intend to renounce his quest. He returned home to inform his parents about his plans. He was most reluctant to part with them. He always hoped that he could give his parents a comfortable life, but until then, he had yet to realize that desire. Dad, Mom. I have to go. The 2 elderly hopefully looked behind Li Yunmu and then suspiciously asked, where is that girl, Yuan Baiao? That Baiao had something to do and left first. Next time, I will bring her to see you, he said respectfully. The 2 elders sighed and said, that child Baiao is very good. You must take care of her properly in the future. Don't bully her. Their words sounded like irony to Li Yunmu, since Yuan Baiao had already sacrificed herself to save them. Li Yunmu's eyes grew misty, and he resolutely said, Dad, Mom, you don't need to worry. Next time, I will definitely bring Baiao to see you. When the elders heard Li Yunmu's definite response, the suspicion in their eyes vanished. When he looked at their calm expressions, Li Yunmu felt suffocated for some reason. He suddenly knelt down in front of the 2 of them as if doing it in place of Yuan Baiao. They looked at him in astonishment and hurriedly went to support him up. After seeing their actions, they couldn't help but ask in astonishment, what's going on? Son. Li Yunmu tapped his head against the ground while saying, since the past, your son hasn't been taking good care of you. Your son is unfilial, so you will have to take care of yourself. Idiot son, you do what you have to do. How could we as your parents not understand? Quickly stand up. The parents quickly supported Li Yunmu. While wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes, they repeatedly admonished him. Outside life must be very hard. Don't forget to take care of your health. Your body is the most important. Li Yunmu nodded, then reluctantly bid farewell to the 2 of them. He left Li Tian, Li Dai, Li Feng and Li Yun in the Lucky Wind City once again because they were quite familiar with Lin Yuero and were proficient in administering with her. They could also take care of his parents in his place. When he reached the entrance to Lucky Wind City, Lin Yuero was there. She had been waiting for him for a long time. Have you truly decided to leave? Can't you stay a few more days? Lin Yuero's eyes were filled with reluctance. The matters on Earth have all been settled, so why did he still have to go? I still have to go save Bao. Li Yunmu said indifferently. Lin Yuero was slightly startled. Bao's spirit had already dissipated, so what was there to save? Li Yunmu had to have some method to do it if he said that. Lin Yuero was clear about that in her heart, so she didn't ask more. She took a deep breath. You really like her? Li Yunmu nodded. Perhaps. She sacrificed herself to save our Earth, but I cannot let her sacrifice herself for me. I have to save her. When Lin Yuero heard his words, she felt both envious and jealous as well as helpless. All the hard work she had done to take care of Lucky Wind City couldn't compare to Yuan Bao saving the common people. Chapter 716, Daughter. The world was unfair. Lin Yuero looked at Li Yunmu's departing figure and felt suffocated. It was especially so when he said to her that he thought that she was the one who understood him the most. Those words broke Lin Yuero's heart. He had ruthlessly struck her. In front of her, he talked about his feelings for another woman, completely disregarding her emotions. Then I hope your journey goes smoothly, she said indifferently. Li Yunmu suddenly lowered his head and said, the matter you spoke about, I will think it over, but not now. Wait until Bao returns, then she will make the decision. If she is willing to receive you, then I will finish this matter. Lin Yuero was startled. It should have been a matter only between her and Li Yunmu, yet another woman would make the final decision. This was a complete mockery of her feelings for Lin Yuero. But she chose to endure it. After all, she was completely obsessed with Li Yunmu. Otherwise, his figure wouldn't have appeared before her in the fifth layer of the mythical realm. After Li Yunmu turned around to leave, he said without turning his head back, carefully manage Lucky Wind City. This earth was rescued by me and Bao, so don't let our efforts be wasted. While watching Li Yunmu's departing figure, Lin Yuero could hear the sound of her heart shattering. Li Yunmu entered the heavenly bridge platform and quickly returned to the origin world. The region where he descended was different from before, but he was still in the eastern domain. The distance between the eastern domain and western region could be considered as fairly large. Li Yunmu chose the Crow Soul Valley as the landing point, and used the opportunity to take a look at Missan. The Crow Soul Valley had begun to flourish. Under Miss Anne's lead, the people of Crow Soul Valley were extremely comfortable, acting as faithful servants of Nuwa. And Li Yunmu had personally met Nuwa. If the people of Crow Soul Valley learned about it, they would probably be extremely excited. How have been these days, Missan? Missan puffed her cheeks and coldly snorted. I have a name now, okay? Everyone calls me An Ning. Li Yunmu smiled at her in reply. So you have already accepted your identity. From the time I inherited my mother's will, I have understood my mission. I am living comfortably, so you don't need to worry about me. My days at the Crow Soul Valley are extremely carefree and unfettered. This is the entrance to the ancient lands, but the H.A.C.K sect deals with the outside trouble for us. As long as no calamity descends, our Crow Soul Valley will continue to flourish. The person before Li Yunmu was not the Missan he knew. The woman he saw now was completely different from the two-faced ruthless leader of Underworld Serpent. After experiencing many things, her temperament had undergone many changes. What about you? Have you saved your people successfully? Li Yunmu nodded and said, after I obtained the ancient secret method, I returned and rescued my world. Now I'm back to the origin world once more. Why the hell did you return? Why not stay at home? You would feel warm and happy while staying at home and away from mindless killing. I also want to rest, but I have another mission. Great strength comes with even greater responsibilities. Looking at the hidden bitterness in Li Yunmu's words, Missan patted his back with annoyance. Raise your spirits. You encouraged me to continue on back then. How have the times changed since that time? I haven't been gone long. Your attitude has changed for the better. What do you mean you haven't been away for long? You've already been gone for a year. You think I haven't investigated you? Miss An said with a pout while crossing her arms in front of her chest. What? A year has already passed. Li Yunmu had only stayed on the earth for a few days, so how could a year have passed in the origin world? Why had the time passed so quickly? Could it be because of him using the ancient secret method to change the trajectory of stars that the Earth's time had slowed down? He suddenly recalled some of the advice Fuxi and Nuwa had given him when he was departing. Once you unleash the ancient secret method and the trajectory of the stars is changed, the time will get caught in the black hole. It might stagnate for a very long time, and Earth's time will become inaccurate because of it. Li Yunmu hadn't paid attention to it at that time, but right then, he recalled it once more. At the moment, his plane was the only remaining among the other parallel planes. He hadn't noticed the time slowing down, but a year had already passed in the origin world. Seems like it's the influence of the ancient secret method. What do you mean? Miss An asked while blinking with her big eyes. Nothing. I will take my leave first. I have to rescue someone and can't stay here for long. Right then, Li Yunmu was very short on time. If he didn't resurrect his wife in a week, everything will have been a waste. Li Yunmu solemnly went to the central Emperor Mountain and began to search for the tracks of the path he took in the past like a violent gale. The Fuzang tribe still worshipped him as their god, but this time, he only descended to pass through. He also heard of the 3 divine treasures which he had casually left behind, having turned into the source of conflict between different factions of the Fuzang country. Li Yunmu suddenly remembered the pearl. He and the Dragon Lady Beautiful Silk had agreed that regardless of wherever he was, he could reach the Dragon Silk Palace using it. It was necessary since in the ocean, he would easily lose direction. If he had a waver boat, then proceeding towards the western region would become easier. The pearl flickered in his hand when he took it out. With a single thought afterwards, he arrived at the Dragon Silk Palace. After it was destroyed by the demonic being, it was reconstructed, and it looked as luxurious as before. When Li Yunmu arrived, he was again obstructed by marine soldiers. Who are you? They asked. Li Yunmu suddenly showed them the pearl. I have come to find the Dragon Lady. The marine soldiers looked at the pearl in Li Yunmu's hand and instantly invited him into the Dragon Silk Palace. The pearl represented the Dragon Lady. Since she had given such an important treasure to the mortal, his status could not be low. When Li Yunmu entered the Dragon Silk Palace and saw the mature Dragon Lady, he suddenly became absent-minded. Chapter 717, Heavenly Grand Ritual. When Beautiful Silk looked at Li Yunmu, she became quite happy while holding a child in her hand. She smiled and moved forward to meet him. You mortal are really too emotional and trustworthy. Have you come to see your child? Li Yunmu nodded, because he recalled that 1 year ago, he and the Dragon Lady had promised that he would come to see their child after 1 year. Many complex emotions flickered through his eyes when he looked at the beautiful child in his embrace. He hadn't expected that he would become a father so quickly. It's a girl. We Dragon Ladies have required someone to inherit our Dragon Silk Palace for many generations. Li Yunmu nodded, picking the child and closely holding it in his hands. Take good care of her. I will come to see her again. Li Yunmu indifferently smiled, feeling somewhat reluctant to leave the place. He could not believe that he had truly become a father. His child was also really adorable, so wouldn't leaving it be such a pity? He suddenly asked, in the future, can you tell her that she has a dad? Beautiful Silk smiled bitterly. I don't know whether I would be alive by the time she grows up. Although Dragon Lady is the most respectable position in the Dragon Silk Palace, our lifespans are very short, even shorter compared to the mermaids. We Dragon Ladies can only reproduce with humans, and in order to continue the succession of Dragon Silk Palace, we use all sorts of methods to draw humans here. Back then, you were also guided here by me." Li Yunmu was slightly startled, then holding Beautiful Silk's hand, he said, "Don't speak more, you will definitely live to see our child grow up. I am not joking with you. The time I have remaining is not long. I have 3 more years left. My greatest desire is for our daughter to grow well during that time." Li Yunmu placed a crescent moon-shaped pendant on his daughter and asked, "Does she have a name?" Beautiful Silk smiled gently. "Her name is Ripple." Ripple. When Li Yunmu placed his hand on Ripple, he suddenly heard the system start shouting. "Have you gone crazy? Can you put away your ridiculous pity?" Upon hearing the system's curses, Li Yunmu knitted his eyebrows and said inwardly, "I only want my daughter to live longer. What's the problem? Your actions defy fate. Do you understand that? If you forcefully pour your power into the Dragon Lady's body, her power will be influenced by you. It might backfire and cause her lifespan to become even shorter." Li Yunmu paused and withdrew his hand, then indifferently said, "Don't tell me there's no other way." The system took a deep breath before saying, "The lifespans of Dragon Ladies are very short, which is their fate. If you want to change the fate of a clan, you can only use the Heavenly Grand Ritual. It is the supreme treasure of Southern Fields Lanlu. If you want to obtain it, you must travel over land and water and defeat the 8 because they have been guarding it for eternity. The Southern Fields Lanlu have always believed in the Heavenly God, and they consider it their lucky charm. You taking it away is easier said than done." Li Yunmu tightly clenched his fist. "In any case, I will give it a try." "Alright, I wasn't going to tell you about the secret techniques, but seeing that you are going to do something foolish, I got annoyed. Oh, have to tell you about them so that you don't do anything that I can't see again." Li Yunmu slightly smiled and said, "Seems like you still don't want me to have an accident. You are the host. Everything inside your body, including your emotions, are linked with me. When you have strong emotions, I am also influenced by them. Helping you is like helping myself. You don't need to think about it much." Knowing that the system was reluctant to admit it to him, Li Yunmu didn't continue bothering with it. However, just a moment ago, the system had said that their states of mind were linked. Then when he and Brunhilde did that sort of thing, wouldn't it have also sensed it? What could be done about it? Li Yunmu gave his daughter to Beautiful Silk, then said, "I guarantee you that after half a year, I will return to change the fate of Dragon Ladies." Beautiful Silk was somewhat startled by the resoluteness of the mortal before her. He was even doing it for her, which moved her heart. "Idiot! Actually, I truly don't mind," Li Yunmu said. "I want the waiver boat, since I need to hurry to the Western world. First, to rescue someone, and second, to find the treasure to change the fate of Dragon Ladies." Beautiful Silk smiled at him. The waiver boat had been prepared long ago. No one has come to the Dragon Silk Palace for a long time, so the waiver boat had been set aside for a very long time. This time, Li Yunmu was much more familiar with the driving of the waiver boat. Moreover, according to the map that the system gave him, he quickly found the path leading to the 2 poles of morning and evening. Fortunately, the waiver boat was very fast and reached the destination in less than 3 days. He had to quickly get his hands on the Millennium Divine Staff. "Bio, I will soon save your spirit." Li Yunmu tightly held the book, which was the ancient secret method that could change the trajectory of stars, in his hand. It was completely dull, unlike previously, when it was sparkling with radiance. Previously, when you left behind the ancient secret method, was it living or dead? Li Yunmu asked suddenly. "You want to ask whether Yuan Biao was living at that time or not?" Li Yunmu nodded, implying that it was his meaning. "She didn't exist. The main reason behind Yuan Biao forming a spirit is the influence of primordial God world and Nuwa. Nuwa can create people, so making a Yuan Biao isn't difficult for her. Moreover, combined with the spiritual influence of primordial God world, the formation of a mature woman like Yuan Biao isn't hard to explain. Brunhilde's long spear didn't have any intelligence, let alone the secret genetic code. Both of them were non-living objects. The only treasure which turned sentient was the ancient secret method of the ancient lands. The divine spear possessed strength, the ancient secret method could change the trajectory of stars, the secret genetic code could create gods, Millennium divine staff could bestow intelligence, while heavenly grand ritual could change fates. Each of the 5 treasures left behind by the system had their unique uses and were extremely rare treasures. Li Yunmu knew that the reason why he had reached the half-god realm was the secret genetic code. And right then, he was proceeding to obtain the final 2 treasures. After 2 days, Li Yunmu chose the route that would lead him to the vicinity of 2 poles of morning and evening. In order to resurrect Yuan Baiao's spirit, regardless of how many obstructions he faced in the 2 poles of morning and evening, he would not give up. Chapter 718, The Battle Between 2 Factions. The 2 poles of morning and evening were in the central region, which was also known as Sand Sea because of the yellow sand that flew everywhere and got into people's eyes. With the sand hitting his face, Li Yunmu kept proceeding forward until he encountered the trademark of the 2 poles of morning and evening pyramids. They were the fruits of intelligence of the people of 2 poles of morning and evening as well as altars for offering sacrifices to the sun god. When Li Yunmu showed up, he immediately attracted the resentment of the natives. H.A.C.K showed up personally to block him. "This is the Sand City. Have you mistakenly come to the wrong region? Are you from the Eastern Domain?" Li Yunmu's every movement resembled that of people from the Eastern Domain, so the Sand City's H.A.C.K couldn't help but place his origin there while frowning. "I have come in order to see your gods," Li Yunmu said calmly. H.A.C.K's complexion changed. Since when could anyone see the ancient gods of the 2 poles of morning and evening whenever they wanted? What exactly was the crazy person intending to do? He had dubious origin and was being impudent, so H.A.C.K couldn't be blamed for being impolite. He called out to the troops of Sand City, and many soldiers charged towards Li Yunmu while brandishing their weapons. However, they only possessed the strength of sage flux experts. In Li Yunmu's eyes, regardless of their numbers, they were all just ants. "I don't want to injure your people. Be obedient and tell me where are your gods," he said calmly. H.A.C.K was still determined to battle. He was sure that the youth was only showing false bravado. However, the instant the soldiers attacked Li Yunmu, the pharaoh was left dumbstruck. Li Yunmu released an energy shockwave from his body, which forced the attacking soldiers to retreat. There was great disparity between the strength of the 2 sides. The soldiers were completely unable to get close to Li Yunmu and fell down like toppled mountains and overturned seas. H.A.C.K was somewhat stupefied. The youth wasn't an easy one to push around. Given his strength, he should already be a half-step god at the least. Without giving him enough time to think, Li Yunmu arrived in front of the pharaoh, and the man's head filled with cold sweat. "I will ask you again, where are the gods of 2 poles of morning and evening? Perhaps you can tell me the address of the 3 gods." H.A.C.K couldn't betray the gods, and so he spoke through clenched teeth. "I won't tell you, You are quite loyal. But aren't you afraid that I will attack your people?" A pulled bow was already in Li Yunmu's hand. If H.A.C.K didn't tell him the truth, he would destroy the Sand City. The countless people in Sand City would then be forced out of their homes. Hesitation appeared in the eyes of H.A.C.K. He took a deep breath and said, "I only know that each of the 3 gods have their own jobs. As for their specific locations, I don't know them. Moreover, there is a battle going on between the gods currently." Li Yunmu narrowed his eyes. Was it because of the instability of the 2 poles of morning and evening that the system had told him before? After a year, it seemed like a battle had broken out between the 2 major factions of the region. Sun god Ra led netherworld god Osiris and earth god Geb to fight against Horus, who is leading death god Anubis, as well as the three fate gods, which resulted in the battle. All I know right now is that they are most likely in the sky and not in the mortal world, otherwise, they would have influenced the people of Sand City. Our gods are very civilized. Li Yunmu took a deep breath, then released the pharaoh. Why not tell me the important information right away? Then your soldiers wouldn't have had to be in pain. After he finished speaking, Li Yunmu disappeared from Adam's gaze. The pharaoh shuddered, finding the strange incredibly terrifying. Li Yunmu rose high into the air to find the location of the battle between the two poles of morning and evening. Soon, he found traces of the gods in the Sand Sea. Sun god Ra was riding on his winged god dragon while leading the other two gods of two poles of morning and evening and Osiris' wife Isis to confront the people of Horus. Horus, we have been fighting for so long, so why don't you obediently follow me? You'll only die if you don't. Ra, you don't need to be so impudent. We will quickly find a new sun god to substitute you. Your cowardly managing style will only bring disaster to the people of two poles of morning and evening. Horus, the pharaoh of Sand City, should be your so-called substitute? He is only a mortal, so how can he inherit my position? You think that the subjects will agree? Even so, he is more formidable than you. Horus had been discontent with the way Ra managed things for a long time, so under the incitement of death god Anubis, he finally decided to split away from Ra's control. You don't know how many powers are eyeing us covetously in the origin world. If I weren't striking water right and left, do you think our two poles of morning and evening would have survived until today? Master God Amun hasn't awakened yet, and you plan to divide us at such a time. Horus, why are you wasting words? Don't tell me that you forgot the words of that being. Don't think about dying and just get rid of Ra and them. Death god Anubis shouted loudly. Horus was hesitating in the beginning, but when he heard Anubis' reminder, his gaze became more ruthless. Ra, today is the day you die, he said furiously. He then rushed at Ra and his winged god dragon with his long pike. In Li Yunmu's eyes, it was only a matter of time before a true battle broke out between the two sides. When Li Yunmu heard the words of death god Anubis, he thought that there was something hidden in them. It did not seem like Horus was acting of his own volition, but was being controlled by someone else. As for who exactly that was, it wasn't clear. Li Yunmu chose to join the battle. He had clashed with the three Egyptian gods, so he knew their strength, but he didn't know anything about the four gods under Horus' command. When he descended from the sky by himself, he picked death god Anubis as his first target. Explosive thunder heavy kick. He struck like a tornado, and death god Anubis' feet sank into the sand. Death god Anubis frowned instantly when faced with the uninvited guest. Horus was also stunned by the stranger suddenly dropping from the sky. On the other hand, Ra, Osiris, and Geb were pleasantly surprised. Wasn't it the mortal who had defeated them by himself last time? Why did he suddenly come? Chapter 719, 7 Artifacts. Li Yunmu continued to suppress death god Anubis while indifferently saying, "Seems like the main culprit behind the division into factions and imminent battle between the gods is you." When death god Anubis felt Li Yunmu's leg becoming more and more powerful, he clenched his teeth in fury. "Who exactly are you? This is a battle between the gods of our two poles of morning and evening, so it is none of your business." Li Yunmu ruthlessly pressed him down. "I and the three Egyptian gods can be considered to be acquainted after clashing last time. If you decided to split up your side, I would be somewhat unhappy. The reason I came here is because I have an important matter to discuss with Ra. If you all make me unhappy, I will have to teach you a lesson." His words were extremely tyrannical and startled Horus. The other person was only a mortal, yet he was so domineering, going as far as to say that he had traded blows with the three Egyptian gods? What sort of joke was that? Even if Themertal didn't know the strength of the three Egyptian gods, it should be impossible for him not to know of their strength. After all, even Horus himself somewhat dreaded them. R.A. smiled at Lee Yun-mu. Many thanks youngster for supporting us at such a crucial time. Don't be polite. I have come to discuss an important matter with you. Death god Anubis was almost suppressed to the point that he couldn't move a single step. After some time, Lee Yun-mu relaxed and slowly moved toward R.A. Anubis was thoroughly shocked and howled, "Mortal, you are courting death." When Anubis rushed at him, Lee Yun-mu gave him a cold glance. That glance was so terrifying that it even shook the death god. Despite that, Anubis urged his dark attribute energy forward without any hesitation. It turned into a ray of black lightning that instantly reached Lee Yun-mu. "Ha ha ha ha! Just a mortal, and you still dare to fight a god? You are courting death." However, that black lightning was instantly swallowed by Lee Yun-mu. He used the great devouring technique and absorbed the power threatening his being. R.A. couldn't help but shake his head after seeing that. Truly a reckless guy. This youth is not a mortal, and his strength is comparable to that of Master God Amun. Ra's words made Death God Anubis' complexion change, but it was already too late. Lee Yun-mu returned the power of black lightning absorbed by great devouring technique straight back at him. Bang! Death God Anubis was instantly wrapped in his own black lightning, while on the other side, cold sweat poured down Horus' forehead. Who exactly was that stranger? How could he be on Ra's side? If such a person was on Ra's side, they simply weren't his opponents. Anubis was defeated, and the three gods of fate cowered in fear. Lee Yun-mu saw that Horus had no more intention to fight, so he began to talk to R.A. "All right, I helped you get rid of your problem, so we can speak about other matters." "Haha, youngster, why did you suddenly come here? Isn't it to pay a visit to us?" Lee Yun-mu shook his head. "I want to ask you about the whereabouts of Millenium Divine Staff. I want to use it to rescue someone." Ra's brow creased. "Rescue someone? You want to use Thousand-Year Artifact? Millenium Divine Staff is Thousand-Year Artifact? What do you mean?" "A deep secret is concealed beneath Sand City. It is a slab protected by the Pharaoh, and there are 7 dents on it. The 7 dents are for the 7,000 years artifacts," R.A. patiently explained to Lee Yun-mu. "They are used to seal an ancient demon god whose strength is comparable to that of our creator god, who is Master God Amun. Because of that, the 7,000 years artifacts have been protected by pharaohs for many generations. I haven't heard anything about them for many years. We can only go and ask the Pharaoh of Sand City." After R.A. finished speaking, Lee Yun-mu answered calmly. "Thanks. I am in a hurry. Seems like this mortal has encountered some trouble," Osiris said when Lee Yun-mu departed. "It has already been a very long time since someone inquired about the 1,000-year artifacts. The seal on the Dark Master hasn't been removed, right? The Dark Master is still dormant. Could it be that you truly intend to get rid of the seal of Dark Master? His strength isn't comparable to that of Demon God. If the Demon God was released by someone with ulterior motives, we could only use the strength of the Dark Master to exterminate it. However, even if you used the Dark Master to exterminate the Demon God, our 2 poles of morning and evening would sink into chaos. We can't bother with so many things. Although this mortal's strength is comparable to that of Amun, even Amun couldn't even exterminate the Demon God, let alone speak of this mortal." After hearing how resolute R.A. was being, Osiris didn't continue speaking. All of it was for the subjects of the 2 poles of morning and evening to decide. How could he not understand that? According to Ra's words, Lee Yun-mu went to Sand City and found Adam. When he saw Lee Yun-mu, the pharaoh immediately tried to hide like a mouse in front of a cat. But Lee Yun-mu grabbed his shoulder with one hand and coldly said, "Where are the 1,000-year artifacts? I asked Sun God Ra, and he said that they have been hidden by the pharaohs. Take me to the 1,000-year artifacts." "Okay, I will immediately take you to the 7 artifacts." Adam brought Lee Yun-mu to the underground of Sand City where only the pharaohs of the successive generations could enter. There was the secret that has been guarded for many generations. Since Sun God Ra had already told the youth of the secret, it was clear that he wanted him to enter. When the mortal already knew about the 7 artifacts, how could Adam dare to not lead him there? When they reached the underground room, it was brightly lit. The walls of the cave were engraved with legends and myths of 2 poles of morning and evening, and in the center was a slab of stone. It sealed the demon god mentioned by Ra. The moment Li Yunmu arrived in front of the slab of stone and took a look, he was shocked. There was not a single artifact inside it. Li Yunmu looked around with suspicion and saw a mysterious person walk out of the shadows. His face was covered by a hint of demonic intent. Chapter 720, The Dark Demon God. Ha ha ha, thank you. Mortal, without your guidance, I wouldn't have been able to enter this underground room, and the majestic dark demon god wouldn't have been resurrected. This sand city will soon become a cemetery. A silver-haired youth holding a bundle stood in front of Adam and Li Yunmu. Mo Yang, you. Adam said with some astonishment. Mo Yang smiled lightly at him. Pharaoh, why do you think I was willing to serve upon you until now? I only believe in Lord Demon God, everyone else are just stepping stones for my plans in my eyes. Li Yunmu didn't care about anyone's grudges and grievances, and he indifferently said, I am not interested in your disagreements, but I need the 1,000 years staff. Give it to me. I am sorry, but it is an important artifact to resurrect the demon god, Mo Yang said coldly. Li Yunmu thought of rushing forward and snatching it, but who would have guessed that Mo Yang would suddenly toss the 7 artifacts into the air. Immediately, golden light exploded forth and flickered repeatedly. Pharaoh Adam was almost blinded by the brilliant golden light. Li Yunmu looked at the 7,000-year artifacts and couldn't help the shock in his heart. The 7,000-year artifacts were all created of pure gold and were flickering with bright light. They were the 1,000-year shield, 1,000-year disc, 1,000-year eye, 1,000-year scale, 1,000-year key, 1,000-year crown, and 1,000-year staff. When Li Yunmu saw the Millennium Divine Staff and wanted to get hold of it, who could have expected that the 7 artifacts would suddenly fall on the slab and release an intense shockwave? Even Li Yunmu was forced to retreat because of the attack, and a hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes. The 7 artifacts automatically combined with the slab. Finished. We are all finished. The 7 artifacts and the slab need to be kept apart or a catastrophe will happen. Li Yunmu frowned when he saw Adam already lying on his stomach on the ground. At that moment, the white light from the slab was projected on the wall of the basement. Within it, a dark silhouette could be seen. A hint of pleasant surprise appeared in Mo Yang's greedy eyes. He hurriedly prostrated himself on the ground and said toward the shadow, Lord Demon God. You have finally returned. I have waited for you for thousands of years. Lord Demon God. Mo Yang's sinister appearance made him seem like a devil in the eyes of Adam. Li Yunmu slightly knitted his brows. The demon god was about to come out and he didn't know whether he could deal with it easily or not. The lack of certainty made a hint of hesitation appear in Li Yunmu's gaze. If even Ra and the others couldn't find a way to deal with the demon god, then it had to be quite troublesome. But Li Yunmu wasn't someone who would choose to abandon his quest because the opponent was troublesome. If he wanted to rescue Yuan Biao, he had to obtain the Millennium Divine Staff. It had been used to summon the demon god being, so what else could he do but try to fight it? When he looked at the system for assistance, it was still calm. Don't panic. The 7 artifacts were manufactured by the subjects of 2 poles of morning and evening and are all fake. The Millennium Divine Staff that I left behind is in the pyramid, so you need to go to the pyramid. Li Yunmu heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that the Millennium Divine Staff he saw was fake. Fortunately, the system had told him about it, or else he would have been like a headless chicken. But wouldn't leaving right then be somewhat inappropriate? It was him who had released the dark demon god, so walking away would be irresponsible on his part. While Li Yunmu was hesitating, he saw Adam's frightened appearance. He nervously clutched Li Yunmu's legs while constantly shuddering. God, I request you to please save our people. The dark demon god will destroy our sand city. The dark demon god was that terrifying? Li Yunmu took a deep breath. When he looked at the passage of white light, the dark silhouette finally came out. The dark demon god's body was extremely enormous, and he had a sinister smile that was a match for the one on Mo Yang's face. Ha ha ha, thanks for releasing me. Given that we are meeting for the first time, I also have something for you. The dark demon god suddenly grabbed Mo Yang's neck, then coldly said, as the person who resurrected the great demon, you should feel supreme honor. Mo Yang's face turned red. The dark demon god, whom he had just released, had turned to kill him instead of rewarding him. Li Yunmu found it unfathomable that there was surprisingly such a vicious person in the world. He had encountered countless foes, but the dark demon god in front of him was the most terrifying one. After the dark demon god killed Mo Yang, his gaze fell on Li Yunmu and Adam. Are you my wake-up snacks? Then I won't be polite. Seeing that the demon god had focused his attention on them, Li Yunmu immediately picked Adam and rushed out of the basement. They couldn't continue staying around anyway, otherwise, the demon god would definitely kill them. After they left the basement, they saw the demon god break out after them. Instantly, the entire Sand City sunk into a crisis. The common people of Sand City looked at the enormous body of the dark demon god and immediately bolted. When the pharaoh saw the panicking people, his heart began to hurt. Everything is my fault. I have brought disaster on my people of Sand City. Now isn't the time to say such things. We have to think of a way to defeat the dark demon god. With every step of dark demon god, the houses in Sand City toppled. His destructive force was truly terrifying. Your dark demon god has returned. Ha 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 ha. The dark demon god looked at Sand City like a toy. Upon seeing him, the people started to flee in fright. Their miserable wails echoed all around. The three Egyptian gods rushed over and said to Li Yunmu, youngster, I request that you transfer the people of Sand City to a safe place and leave this guy for us to deal with. If death god Anubis hadn't been defeated by Li Yunmu, he would have been extremely delighted to see such a scene. Li Yunmu nodded, then took Adam to withdraw with him. He also wanted his help to find the Millenium Divine Staff in the pyramid. We are unable to unleash the power of the Dark Master. It seems like we can only rely on ourselves. The three gods looked at each other in dismay.